On my son's birthday, he looked me in the eye and said the best gift I could give him was to disappear from his life forever. I smiled, walked away quietly, and let him celebrate. An hour later, the police arrived, filled my yard, and arrested my son. What happened next was beyond belief. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you are listening from. The chocolate cake balanced in my left hand as I struggled with the back door handle. In the kitchen drawer, 28 candles were waiting. But first, I wanted to surprise Brandon with this homemade cake. Under my right arm was a carefully wrapped gift, a vintage watch he had admired months ago. A family heirloom passed down from his grandfather. Laughter floated through the glass door. My son's voice rose above the rest, animated and loud. The April air carried the smell of grilled burgers and beer. Perfect weather for his 28th birthday celebration. I paused, not wanting to interrupt. Through the glass, I saw Brandon by the grill with Mike and Jason, his closest friends. Samantha sat at the patio table scrolling through her phone while others mingled around the yard. "Man, your dad really went all out for this party," Mike said, his voice clear. "New sound system, premium drinks, even hired a catering service." Brandon took a long drink from his bottle. "Yeah, well, he's just trying to buy my affection again. Thinks money fixes everything." I froze, cake still in my hands. The gift suddenly weighed more under my arm. "At least he cares," Jason added. "My dad hasn't called in months." "You're lucky." Brandon's laugh was sharp. "Robert's always on my case about finding a job, moving out, taking responsibility, like he doesn't get how bad the economy is." My grip tightened on the cake plate. I watched as he gestured carelessly with his beer. Honestly, the best gift would be if the old man finally disappeared from my life. I'm tired of his control. The word struck me like a blow. I staggered back, nearly dropping the cake. 28 years of birthdays, holidays, baseball games, bedtime stories, all reduced to casual cruelty. "Who knew your dad was so pushy?" Mike said, raising his bottle. Jason laughed. "Bet he's got your whole life planned out on a spreadsheet." "That's what engineers do." "Exactly." "It's his way or no way," Brandon said. He turned toward the house and I quickly pressed myself against the wall. Sometimes I just wish he'd find somewhere else to be. Permanently. The gift slipped from under my arm, landing softly on the doormat. I caught it just before collapsing. The watch, my father's watch, passed down through generations, suddenly felt worthless. "You could always move out," Samantha said flatly, not looking up from her phone. "With what money?" "He controls everything." "Treats me like I'm still 12. Brandon drained his bottle and tossed it aside. "At least the free rent isn't bad." Laughter broke out again. I stood frozen, a 62-year-old man holding a cake for someone who wished I'd vanish. The candles in the kitchen no longer mattered. What was I even celebrating? My hands shook, the cake wobbling as memories returned. Brandon's graduation party, when he called me the guy who pays for everything. The family dinner where he rolled his eyes at every story I told. The Christmas morning when he barely looked up from his phone while opening gifts. 28 years. Had I been blind all this time? I leaned against the doorframe, struggling to take in what I had just heard. Inside, the decorations I had hung that morning still waited. On the dining room table sat the carefully wrapped presents I had chosen weeks ago. All of it reduced to what he saw as control and unwanted interference. The party went on as if I didn't exist. Brandon stood near the grill, flipping burgers while Mike told a story that kept everyone laughing. They looked at ease, mocking the very person who paid for the house, the food, and the ground beneath them. I stepped back from the door, the cake shaking in my hand, the wrapped watch in the other feeling like a burden. Through the glass, I watched my son enjoying a party built on everything I had provided, while wishing I would disappear. A cold, sharp feeling tightened my chest. More than hurt, it was something harder. I thought of the mortgage I had covered for 5 years. The bills, the insurance, the taxes, the stocked fridge, the car Brandon drove without permission. All of it taken for granted while he longed for my absence. I turned toward the kitchen, my thoughts shifting. If Brandon truly wanted me gone, perhaps it was time to give him that gift, though not in the way he imagined. The cake could wait. The candles could wait. First, I had calls to make. 10 minutes passed in the kitchen. The cake sat untouched, its frosting softening from the warmth of my hands. I paced between the refrigerator and the window, watching my son laugh, processing the sting of his words. Finally, I stepped outside again. No cake, no present, no pretenses, only a father demanding clarity. Brandon hadn't moved. He stood with a beer in hand, deep in conversation with Mike and Jason. Smoke drifted lazily from the grill as I approached. Some guests noticed, expecting another reminder about the noise or the mess. Brandon. My voice cut through their laughter. We need to talk, privately. He turned with the same careless expression I'd seen before, when I caught him using my credit card, when neighbors complained about his parties. Dad, whatever you heard, it's true, he said flatly. You're interfering with my life, and everyone here knows it. His bluntness struck me. No apology, no shame, only confidence born from never facing consequences. How can you say that after everything I've done for you? Nobody asked you to, he shot back. That was your choice. You act like I owe you for decisions you made. He drank again, his friends nodding along. Mike leaned closer. He's right, Mr. Davis. Parents choose to have kids. Their casual cruelty cut deeper than Brandon's words. These were his allies, defending his disrespect with empty reasoning. I looked around the yard, my yard, kept up with my work, and saw more guests tuning in. 28 years, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. 28 years of providing everything you needed. And I never asked for any of it, Brandon said, louder now, feeding off the audience. You want gratitude for things I never wanted. That's your problem, Jason laughed sharply. Classic boomer move. I sacrificed, so you owe me. By now the crowd had gathered, watching our confrontation like a show. So when you told your friends you wished I'd disappear, I said, locking eyes with him, you meant it. For the first time. His expression faltered. He hadn't expected me to know. But the hesitation vanished quickly. Yeah, I meant it, he said, lifting his beer. You hover, you nag, you make everything about what you want. Maybe if you lived your own life instead of trying to control mine, we'd both be better off. Guests grew quiet. All eyes were on us now. The controlling father versus the son craving freedom. Your house. Your food, your car, I replied, each word deliberate. All from the person you wish would disappear. That's right, Brandon smirked, his voice cold. And when you finally do, I'll miss the free rent for about 5 minutes. Samantha giggled at the patio table, finally looking up from her phone. Brandon, you're terrible, she said, a compliment in her tone, as if his cruelty were charming rather than cruel. Her laughter, with approving chuckles from Mike and Jason, became a soundtrack to my humiliation. I stood among people who treated my son's cruelty like entertainment. 28 years of midnight feedings, school projects, driving lessons, and college tuition reduced to one public spectacle. The party went on. Music played, the barbecue smoked, guests drank my beer and ate my food while watching the collapse of any respect between father and son. I turned from the circle of faces, some smirking, others avoiding eye contact. Brandon's laughter followed me toward the house, but something in those last moments had shifted. The pain hardened into something colder, more deliberate. He wanted me gone. That could be arranged, but not the way he expected. The stairs creaked beneath me as I climbed to the second floor, each step moving me farther from the laughter. My bedroom door closed with a soft click, finally separating me from the celebration of my humiliation. I stood still, letting the silence settle. Party sounds filtered through the walls, muted conversations, clinking bottles, Brandon's voice cutting through with another joke at my expense. Outside the window, guests moved in the backyard, their shadows crossing the patio stones in the evening light. The mirror above my dresser reflected a man I barely recognized. When had I become someone who absorbed insults and kept providing for the person who wished me gone? My reflection stared back with hollow eyes and memories rushed in. Last spring's car incident returned with sharp clarity. Brandon had dragged me to 3 dealerships, insisting I co-sign for cars he couldn't afford. When I suggested something reasonable, he turned to the salesman with theatrical embarrassment. Sorry about my dad. He doesn't understand that image matters in my field. The salesman was uncomfortable. Brandon continued with precise cruelty. He thinks driving a decent car is showing off. That's what happens when you settle for mediocrity your whole life. I stood there with my checkbook, taking public humiliation while still trying to help him get transportation. The used Honda we settled on cost me $15,000. He complained about it for months. Another memory surfaced, the Christmas dinner where I invited his friends to build bridges. I'd spent days preparing, wanting to show Brandon's circle that his father wasn't the controlling ogre they'd been told. Over dessert, Mike said, "Actually, Mr. Davis, Brandon tells us you're pretty strict about everything," with thinly veiled mockery. Brandon laughed and raised his glass. "You have no idea. Dad thinks he knows what's best for everyone." I sat at the head of my own table, serving wine I paid for to people openly mocking me while my son directed the performance. For years I'd kept smiling, kept hosting, kept enabling the behavior that destroyed any chance of respect between us. But tonight was different. Tonight, Brandon voiced what he really thought, and something inside me changed. I went to the window and looked down at the backyard. There he was, animated, beer in hand, recounting his latest triumph over the old man. His friends clustered around like disciples, hanging on every word. They lived in my house, ate my food, drank my alcohol, and celebrated my public defeat. How many years had I been financing my own humiliation? The engineering part of my mind engaged, the analytic habit I'd used for 3 decades. Variables, constraints, desired outcome. Brandon wanted me out of his life. I wanted respect, or at least an end to active contempt. I shifted away from patience, generosity, and the hope that gratitude would eventually follow. Those tactics had failed. It was time for a different approach. I turned from the window and looked at myself in the mirror again. This time I didn't see a victim or a doormat. I saw a man with resources, options, and the sense to use them. Brandon was 28 and had never held a real job. He had no savings, no credit, and no practical skills beyond living off what others provided. His whole lifestyle depended on my continued willingness to fund his comfort while he publicly mocked me. What would happen if that support simply vanished? The idea brought a cold clarity. I owned this house outright. Every utility bill, every insurance payment, every property tax came from my accounts. The fridge he raided, the internet he used, the electricity for his late-night gaming, all paid by me. If Brandon truly wanted me out of his life, maybe it was time to give him that space. On my terms. I moved toward the back door, hand on the handle. The party went on below, unaware of the change happening in the man who had made it all possible. Brandon was about to learn the difference between independence and abandonment, between freedom and responsibility. He'd asked for distance from his father's influence. Soon he'd have more space than he expected. About 25 minutes after leaving that circle of mockery, I descended the stairs with measured steps, each one bringing me closer to a confrontation that would permanently alter the house dynamics. The back door opened to the same scene, music from portable speakers, guests clustered on the patio with drinks, Brandon holding court at the barbecue. But something fundamental had changed. Not the party, but me. I walked straight across the yard to the DJ table where the sound system sat. Most guests were oblivious that the man supplying everything had decided to act. The wireless microphone lay where I hoped. I picked it up with the calm precision I'd once used to present engineering plans to corporate boards. The music played for a moment as I found the volume control. Then silence fell over the backyard like a dropped curtain. The party is over. My voice carried through the speakers to every corner. I'm asking everyone to leave my property now. The words landed with force. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Beer bottles paused halfway to mouths. Even the most intoxicated guests realized something significant had happened. Brandon's expression moved from surprise to embarrassment, then back to the arrogance that had defined our relationship for years. "Nobody's going anywhere," he said, stepping forward and addressing the crowd instead of me. "This is my party. You're all welcome to stay." Mike immediately sided with him, predictably. "Robert, don't ruin the kid's celebration. It's his birthday. This is my property," I replied into the microphone, steady and factual. "I have the legal right to decide who stays and who leaves." Jason laughed dismissively. "Come on, Mr. Davis, don't be dramatic. We're not hurting anything." Several guests shifted, sensing the conflict was escalating beyond normal family tension. But Brandon's circle rallied, as if they'd never faced consequences before. "Dad, put the microphone down and stop embarrassing yourself," Brandon said, the condescending tone he'd perfected over years of taking my support for granted. "These are my friends. This is my party. You're acting like a crazy person." Samantha giggled at the patio table, treating our dispute like entertainment. Others murmured but didn't head for the exit. "Actually, I can," I said. The microphone made every word clear. "Any property owner may ask people to leave. If they refuse, it becomes trespassing." The casual certainty in my voice seemed to cut through even Brandon's alcohol-fueled bravado. He glanced at his friends, searching for the same support that had emboldened him earlier. "You're not serious," Mike said, losing some of his earlier swagger. "You wouldn't actually call the cops on your own son's birthday." "Watch me," I said. I set the microphone down and turned toward the house. "You have 5 minutes to leave voluntarily. After that, the police will remove you as trespassers." Brandon's voice rose behind me, moving from controlled mockery to something closer to panic. "Dad, you can't do this." "These people are my friends." I paused at the back door and looked over the gathering one last time. 30 years of hosting his friends, buying food, cleaning up the mess, and enduring their casual disrespect in my own backyard. "You wanted me gone from your life?" I asked, my voice carrying without amplification. "This is how that works. When I'm gone, my house goes with me." The door closed behind me with a soft click, muffling the eruption of voices that followed. Through the kitchen window, I watched guests look toward the house, some already moving toward the side gate. I walked to the wall phone and dialed 911. 25 minutes after my call, red and blue lights swept across the backyard like a lighthouse beam through darkness. The party's relaxed atmosphere collapsed as guests noticed the patrol car pulling into my driveway. Officer James Miller entered first through the side gate, his uniform and badge drawing everyone's attention. His partner, Officer Linda Gark, followed closely, both carrying the authority that comes with law enforcement. "Who called the police?" Miller's voice carried the neutral professionalism I expected. "I did," I said, stepping forward near the back door. "This is my property." I asked everyone to end the party and leave, but they refused. Miller nodded, pulling out a notepad as he scanned the uneasy crowd. The music had gone silent, leaving only nervous laughter and hushed voices. "Can you verify ownership of this property, sir?" he asked. I handed him my driver's license and property tax statement, prepared while waiting. 28 years of home ownership had taught me to keep documentation ready. Officer Gark stepped into the center of the patio. Her voice was steady and official. "Everyone present must leave this private property immediately. The owner has requested it, and remaining here is trespassing." The reaction was mixed. Some guests quickly gathered their belongings, uneasy about police involvement in what they thought was a family argument. Others looked at Brandon for direction, though he had no authority to give. "This isn't fair," Samantha protested. "We had permission. Brandon invited us." "Ma'am," Gark replied patiently, "adult children living in a parent's home cannot authorize guests against the owner's wishes." Brandon stepped forward, less confident than before. "Officers, this is ridiculous. It's my birthday party. My father is being vindictive." Miller's tone stayed professional. "Sir, family disputes do not change property law. If your father owns this property and asks guests to leave, they must comply." From my spot near the house, I watched the crowd thin. Half the guests had already moved toward the side gate, unwilling to risk confrontation with police. But Brandon's closest friends remained defiant. Mike and Jason stood beside him, while Samantha lingered with her drink as if the party could continue. "How long do they have to leave?" I asked Miller, keeping calm. "We allow a reasonable time," he replied. But refusal after official notice becomes a more serious matter. The weight of his words settled over the group. Brandon's confidence faltered as he realized what serious matter could mean. "Dad, you can't have us arrested for a party," he said. But his voice carried less conviction. "I'm not having anyone arrested," I replied. "I'm simply exercising my rights as property owner. What happens depends on whether people respect them." Gark checked her watch. "Those wishing to leave should do so now. Anyone still here in 5 minutes will be trespassing." Another wave of guests departed, even some of Brandon's supporters. The party that began with 20 guests was reduced to a stubborn core of 6 or 7. Brandon looked at his shrinking circle of friends, then planted himself firmly on the patio. "I live here," he declared. "This is my home, too." Miller's patience had reached its limit. He stepped closer, hand moving toward his cuffs. "Young man, you are breaking the law. This is your final chance to leave voluntarily." Brandon's reply carried his usual arrogance, but now against real consequences. "I'm not going anywhere." "You can't arrest someone in their own house." "Actually, we can," Gark said firmly, flanking him. "You don't own this property, and you've been ordered to leave by the legal owner." The truth hit Brandon hard. His eyes shifted between the officers, then to me, then to his uneasy friends. "Dad, tell them this is crazy." "I live here. You live here by my permission," I answered. "And that permission is withdrawn." Miller stepped forward, cuffs visible. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Brandon's voice cracked for the first time. "Are you serious? You're actually going to arrest me?" "Turn around now," Miller ordered. The moment hung tense. Brandon's face shifted from disbelief to anger, then fear, as reality sank in. After years of avoiding consequences, he was out of options. Slowly, he turned, stiff with resentment. The click of handcuffs echoed across the patio like a closing door. "Brandon Davis, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing and failure to comply with a lawful order." Miller spoke with the calm detachment of someone who had handled situations like this countless times. Samantha, standing near the unused barbecue grill, let out a sharp gasp. "This can't be real." "Robert, you can't let them arrest your own son." I met her eyes with the same steady composure I'd held all evening. "I'm not allowing anything." I called them because Brandon refused to respect my property rights. As the officers led Brandon toward the side gate, he twisted around to face me. His expression shifted into something I had never seen before, a mix of hatred and disbelief. "Dad, I will never forgive you for this. You think you've won, but you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." The venom in his tone might have shattered me earlier in the day. Now it only confirmed that taking decisive action had been the right choice. A son who could speak with such hostility while being arrested for trespassing on his father's property had already severed any claim to loyalty. "We'll see," I answered evenly. Miller opened the patrol car's rear door, guiding Brandon's head as he climbed inside. Through the glass, I watched his face twisted with rage, his lips moving in silent threats I no longer cared to hear. Mike stepped forward, his earlier bravado gone. "Officer, how long will he be kept?" "When can we bail him out?" "That depends on the charges and the judge's ruling," Garter replied. "Criminal trespassing can carry up to 2 weeks in county jail plus fines. 2 weeks. The number settled in my mind with a deep sense of satisfaction. That would be enough time to set the changes I'd been planning into motion. The patrol car's engine started, red and blue lights reflecting off the driveway as it pulled away. I stood on the porch watching as my son was taken into custody, finally forced to face real consequences for his actions. Samantha cried near the discarded decorations, while Mike and Jason cleared empty bottles with uncertain hands. The party was over in every sense. My backyard at last was mine again. Within minutes, even Brandon's closest allies had gathered their belongings and slipped through the side gate. The speakers were silent, the grill cooling in the night air, paper plates and cups left scattered across surfaces I would clean tomorrow. But tonight, I stood alone in my reclaimed space, listening to the silence that replaced years of chaos. The true work had just begun. The first morning without Brandon felt like stepping into a new house. Coffee brewed quietly while I sat at the kitchen table, no longer waiting for shouts or demands from upstairs. A quick call to the county clerk's office confirmed what Officer Garter had said. Brandon would serve 14 days for trespassing and disorderly conduct. His release date, April 29th at 9 a.m., 14 days. Exactly 2 weeks to carry out the plan that had crystallized during his arrest. I began with the same discipline that had guided my engineering career. Step 1, gather facts. I reviewed 5 years of financial records. The cost of living Brandon had enjoyed under my roof was staggering. $2,800 for rent, $350 for utilities, $400 for food, plus insurance, maintenance, taxes, and other expenses. Altogether, his lifestyle cost me $4,200 a month, or $50,000 a year. And that didn't include money spent on his parties, gas, and constant emergencies. I also researched local real estate. Similar homes in our neighborhood sold for $820,000 to $880,000. Mine, carefully maintained and recently updated, would bring top value. One memory kept returning as I worked. The job fair last November. I had driven Brandon to 3 different opportunities, waited patiently, even coached him on interviews the night before. But each time, he came back with excuses. The manager was too controlling, the pay was beneath him, the commute unreasonable. Later, I discovered he had sabotaged the interviews deliberately, showing up late, poorly dressed, and giving careless answers to guarantee rejection. When I confronted him, he had been blunt. Why would I work some minimum wage job when you give me everything here? That should have been the turning point. Instead, I accepted his reasoning and continued enabling the very behavior that destroyed any chance of mutual respect. By the end of the first week of his sentence, my decision was firm. Brandon wanted me gone. He had said it openly and cruelly enough times to make his intention clear. Fine. I would disappear. But not as the defeated father he expected. The house would be sold while he sat in jail, unaware that his free ride was ending forever. The proceeds would fund my retirement somewhere far from California, somewhere Brandon would never think to look. The second week, I focused on researching retirement communities. With $850,000, I could buy a modest home and secure years of independence. Arizona, Colorado, North Carolina, states with affordable living and no ties to my current life. Brandon's threats during his arrest revealed one truth. He no longer saw me as a father deserving respect, but as an obstacle to remove. His promise that I would regret setting boundaries was the same manipulative language I had endured for years. But this time, there would be no retreat, no compromise, and no slow erosion of my resolve. The solution, viewed through an engineer's lens, was straightforward. Remove the variable causing dysfunction. In this case, that variable was my continued financial support of someone who openly despised the person providing it. As Brandon's release date approached, I finished my research and confirmed my decision. A real estate agent's card lay beside my morning coffee, ready for the call that would set the plan in motion. 28 years of patient guidance, financial support, and unconditional love had resulted only in entitlement, disrespect, and threats when boundaries were enforced. It was time to show Brandon what disappearing truly meant. I dialed Michelle Johnson, a real estate agent whose reviews praised her for speed and efficiency. Her office in downtown San Jose, with city views and walls lined with certificates and property photos, reflected professionalism and success. Mr. Davis. Thank you for calling, she said, motioning to the chair across from her desk. You mentioned needing to sell quickly. What's driving the urgency? I handed her a folder of documents, prepared with the same precision I brought to engineering projects. Family circumstances, personal reasons that require immediate action. She nodded, her expression neutral, a skill clearly refined over years of client interactions. I understand. Let me review your property details, and we can discuss realistic expectations. The evaluation took about 40 minutes. Market analysis, neighborhood comparisons, and pricing strategy. Her systematic approach showed her expertise. Based on the market and your property's features, I recommend listing at $850,000. With proper staging and marketing, serious buyers should appear within a week. Perfect. The timeline aligned with my private deadline. Excellent. I'll agree to that. And if the sale closes within 7 days, I'll add $5,000 to your commission. Her eyes lit up at the incentive. You have my full commitment. Let's see the property this afternoon. The drive home took 20 minutes through familiar streets, soon to be only memories. Michelle followed, her camera equipment visible in her car. Walking through my house with someone measuring its value stirred emotions. Each room held memories of Brandon's childhood, from birthday parties to late homework nights, and the slow shift from a grateful child to an entitled adult. The maintenance is excellent, Michelle said, photographing the kitchen and refinished hardwood floors. This home will show beautifully. Have you considered staging? Whatever you recommend. Cost isn't the concern. Her practiced eye noted lighting, architecture, and buyer-attracting details. Her assessment confirmed my research. The house was ideal for a quick sale. Honestly, properties like this don't stay on the market, she said. With strong marketing and fair pricing, you may even get multiple offers by the weekend. Multiple offers meant bidding wars, possibly pushing the price above target. Brandon's short sentence was working in my favor in ways I hadn't anticipated. Back at her office, the paperwork moved quickly. Disclosure forms, marketing agreements, and schedules. Photos tomorrow, listing Thursday, open house Saturday and Sunday, Michelle explained. Given the urgency and bonus, your property is my top priority. The bonus was legally structured as performance-based compensation, a strong motivator for someone whose livelihood depended on closing. Deals, Mr. Davis, she asked carefully. Are you relocating? This feels like more than downsizing. A complete life change? I answered honestly, though the full truth would have startled her. Sometimes life requires major decisions. She nodded with understanding. I'll make sure this transition is as smooth as possible. The contracts in my hand felt weighty. 7 days remained before Brandon's release, and the mechanism for his lesson in consequences was now documented and underway. One more thing, I said at her office door. I'll need immediate updates on every showing, inquiry, and offer. Of course. You'll be informed in real time. This will move quickly. I walked to my car with the satisfaction of turning years of planning into action. The house that had enabled Brandon's entitlement for 28 years would soon belong to people who truly valued a home. Now, I needed only one detail, Brandon's exact release date, so the final stage could unfold perfectly. The 30-minute drive to Santa Clara County jail gave me time to prepare for what might be my last interaction with anything tied to his current life. The facility rose from the industrial sprawl like a concrete monument to consequences. I needed the exact details my son would soon learn firsthand. Security required ID checks, verification, metal detector screening, and visitor registration, a process that turned people into processed subjects inside the institution. The system's methodical efficiency impressed me. It handled humans like managed data. I need information about an inmate, I told the corrections officer at the visitor desk, sliding my driver's license across the polished counter. The sergeant, Sergeant Davis, no relation, examined my ID with the professional neutrality that matched the sterile surroundings. His uniform and badge signaled authority that stood apart from family ties. Name of the inmate? He asked. Brandon Davis, serving 2 weeks for criminal trespass. His fingers moved over the keyboard with practiced speed, pulling up the records that reduced my son to a booking number, a cell, and a release date, Brandon Davis, booked April 15th. He scanned the monitor without visible emotion. Your son will be released April 29th at 9 a.m. Perfect. The timing matched my plan exactly. Thank you. Is there anything else I should know about release procedures? Standard release. He'll be processed out through this building, receive returned personal effects, and can get a transportation voucher if requested. Sergeant Davis looked up with the calm helpfulness of a public servant. Would you like to visit him while you're here? Visiting hours are daily from 2 to 4 p.m. The offer hung between us. Seeing Brandon might let me assess him, maybe prepare him for returning home. No, that won't be necessary, I said, 4 words that severed the last ties of typical parental duty. Sergeant Davis showed no reaction. Family dynamics were not his concern, only procedure and information. We ended the conversation with the same institutional efficiency with which it had begun. No personal questions, no judgment, no curiosity about why I was gathering release details without planning a visit. Walking back through the security checkpoints felt like stepping out of a system designed to strip identity and choice. Brandon had spent 10 days in a system that reduced people to numbers and timetables, a practical lesson in accountability. The drive home gave me time to finalize the timeline. April 29th, 9 a.m. Brandon would be processed out, expecting to return to the house that had supported his entitlement for 28 years. Instead, he would find that his father had taken the advice he demanded to disappear from his life. Michelle's real estate expertise suggested the property would likely sell by the weekend, giving me days to align closing with Brandon's release. The house that had enabled his disrespect would belong to strangers who wanted a home. The engineering precision of the plan satisfied my methodical instincts, variables controlled, schedules synchronized, resources allocated. All through legal channels Brandon himself had set in motion. I sat in the driveway for a moment, thinking about the house that would soon no longer be my responsibility. Every mortgage payment, every bill, every repair had subsidized someone who wished I'd vanish. Tomorrow I would coordinate showings and buyer interest with Michelle. The institutional visit confirmed that Brandon remained where consequences had placed him, unaware his father was preparing a final lesson in gratitude and respect. By the time he walked out of county jail that Tuesday morning, the house he'd taken for granted would already be in escrow. My phone rang as I reached the front door. Michelle's name lit the screen, likely updates on showings. "Michelle speaking," she said cheerfully as I stepped inside. "Robert Davis, you called." Wonderful news. The Garcia family accepted our asking price. "Full cash offer, no contingencies. Closing tomorrow at 9:30, perfect timing." Brandon would be released at 9, giving him just enough time to arrive home before realizing that his home no longer existed in any practical sense. "Excellent work, Michelle. That bonus is well earned." The next 24 hours became a whirlwind of final arrangements. Moving trucks, document signings, key transfers, the coordinated closure of a plan 2 weeks in the making. Carlos and Maria Garcia arrived with their children and a truck full of hope for a fresh start. Their excitement echoed my own from 30 years earlier, when I'd first bought the house and Brandon still appreciated bedtime stories and birthday cakes. "Mr. Davis, thank you for accepting our offer so quickly," Maria said, children exploring what had been Brandon's rooms. "We know you were in a hurry to sell." I handed Carlos the garage opener and keys, feeling the symbol of passing ownership to people who would value the place. "I do have one small favor to ask," Maria added. "My son might stop by tomorrow not knowing about the sale. Could you give him this note?" I gave her a sealed envelope with Brandon's name, written in my precise script. She took it with the courteous helpfulness of someone familiar with the logistics of family transitions. The note itself had been drafted carefully, brief, emotionally neutral, and final. "Brandon, you said you wanted me to disappear from your life forever. I have granted your wish. The house has been sold. I am traveling extensively and will be unreachable indefinitely. You now have the independence you demanded, Robert. 40 words that summarized 28 years of financial support, emotional investment, and steady disrespect. No forwarding address, no timeline, no room for negotiation or emotional persuasion. After the Garcia family moved into their new home, I walked next door to Frank Collins' house with one suitcase and a request that would place me exactly where I needed to be for what was coming. Frank had been my neighbor for 15 years, a dependable man who cleared snow from driveways and collected my packages when I traveled. Our friendship was built on mutual respect, steady, but never intrusive. "Can I stay with you for a couple of days, Frank? I'm between places." "Of course, old friend." "What happened to the house?" He stepped aside to let me into his familiar living room, where we had often shared coffee and neighborhood updates. "I sold it. Time for some major changes." His expression revealed concern mixed with curiosity, but Frank was wise enough never to press on matters not freely shared. "What about Brandon? Where will he go when he returns?" "Brandon is an adult. He'll make his own arrangements." Something in my tone must have carried finality, because Frank nodded and let it rest. His guest room was comfortable and, more importantly, provided a clear view of my former home's front entrance. That evening I sat by Frank's window, watching the Garcias unpack boxes in rooms where Brandon had long taken my generosity for granted. Tomorrow morning, he would walk up that driveway, assuming his old life of idleness and entitlement would resume. Instead, he would find strangers in possession of what he had always believed was his. The precision of this plan satisfied every part of my methodical nature. Variables controlled, timing exact, resources managed, and the outcome secured through the very legal process Brandon had set in motion. Around 10 p.m., Frank knocked on the door with fresh towels, his steady kindness never failing. "Everything you need in here, Robert. Perfect. Thank you, Frank. Stay as long as you need." Whatever's happening, you have support here. He left me to my thoughts, and my view of the house Brandon had assumed was permanent. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate lesson in consequences, executed with the same precision I once applied to engineering problems. The last thing I saw before turning off the lights was Maria Garcia drawing the curtains in what had once been Brandon's bedroom. By 9:30, the moment I had planned for 2 weeks arrived. From Frank's upstairs window, I watched Brandon turn onto the street with the same casual confidence he had always carried. 2 weeks in county jail had left him thinner, still wearing the clothes he'd been arrested in, a plastic bag of returned belongings in hand. His posture carried no humility, only the eagerness of someone expecting comfort. He walked straight to the house, pulling out keys that no longer fit locks that weren't his. That single motion, confidently reaching for a door belonging to strangers, captured the entire history of our relationship. The Garcia children played in the yard while Carlos unloaded boxes. Their Spanish voices made Brandon pause, his confidence shifting to confusion. "Excuse me," he called out, his tone the same entitled one I had heard countless times. "Who are you people? And what are you doing in my house?" Carlos straightened, politely puzzled. "Sorry, friend. This is our home now." "We bought it last week." "That's impossible," Brandon snapped. "I live here. This is my family's home." Maria appeared at the door, calm and observant. "Are you Brandon Davis?" she asked politely. "Yes, finally someone reasonable. Now please explain why strangers are in my house with their things." "The previous owner left something for you." She disappeared inside, returning with an envelope, 40 words carefully written to end 28 years of enabling. Brandon accepted it reluctantly, his fingers unsteady as he opened it. For the first time, his face revealed recognition that something irreversible had happened. I leaned forward, watching him read the note that would close the chapter of his dependence. "Brandon, you said you wanted me gone from your life. I've decided to grant your wish. The house is sold. I will be traveling and unreachable. You now have the independence you demanded." Robert, his expression shifted exactly as I had imagined. Confusion, disbelief, realization, and finally devastation. After decades of financial support and emotional manipulation, the truth landed. He had taken my love and help for granted. "This can't be real," he muttered, panic replacing entitlement. "He can't just sell our house and leave. Families don't work like that." "I'm sorry," Carlos said sincerely, "but we have the legal paperwork. The sale was finalized yesterday." Brandon staggered, leaning on a mailbox that was no longer his. His plastic bag slipped, spilling his few belongings onto the sidewalk where he had once claimed ownership. "Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to eat?" His voice trembled, more whisper than demand. Maria and Carlos exchanged uneasy looks, unsure how to comfort someone abandoned by design. From my hidden view, I felt both satisfaction and a flicker of reluctant sympathy. Justice had been served. He had received exactly what he asked for, yet watching his collapse stirred something uncomfortably paternal. He stood on the sidewalk, reading the note again and again as if repetition could alter its meaning. Behind him, the Garcia home was alive with appreciation, while he faced the silence of having nowhere to belong. 28 years of enabling had ended with 40 words in a sold house. The lesson was complete, delivered with the same precision I once applied to solving engineering challenges. Brandon folded the note with care and walked away without another word to the Garcia family. Hours passed before I could step away from Frank's window. Brandon had vanished around the corner, yet the image of his tears stayed etched in my memory like an unexpected photograph. He had cried, not the manipulative tears of childhood tantrums, but the genuine sobs of someone who finally understood the price of his choices. For 28 years, I had wondered if real emotion existed beneath his entitled exterior. The answer appeared only when it no longer mattered. That evening, Frank found me in his kitchen, staring at a cup of cold coffee while I processed the weight of successful revenge. "Rough day watching the neighborhood drama?" he asked gently, choosing his words carefully. Something like that. The young man seemed upset about losing his family home. I met Frank's eyes, seeing the concern of someone who had witnessed pain but didn't know its roots. Sometimes consequences take years to appear, but they always come. Frank nodded with the quiet wisdom of a man who knew justice may be delayed, but rarely denied. "Thank you for the hospitality," I said, rising from the table where I had spent so many hours planning. "I'm moving on tomorrow morning." "Where to, Robert?" "To the ocean." "Time to start fresh." Frank didn't ask further. He seemed to understand that some changes need privacy rather than explanation. His friendship had been exactly the support I needed, steady and without demands. "You've got my number if you need anything," he said, though we both knew this goodbye was final. The next morning arrived with bright California sunshine, making new beginnings feel not only possible but inevitable. I placed my single suitcase in the car I had barely driven during 2 weeks of careful planning, feeling lighter than I had in decades. Frank stood on his porch as I backed out, raising a hand in farewell, a gesture carrying 30 years of neighborly respect. I waved back, grateful for his quiet support during the most difficult moral decision of my life. The highway stretched west toward the Pacific, taking me away from everything familiar toward possibilities I had not dared imagine 2 weeks earlier. $850,000 sat in my account. No family obligations, no one relying on me for financial or emotional support. Brandon had received exactly what he said he wanted, a father who disappeared forever. I had granted his wish with the same precision I once used to solve complex engineering problems. The justice was exact, delivered through consequences rather than cruelty. Yet his tears had shifted something, my understanding of who he was beneath the entitlement. He was still my son, still capable of genuine feeling, despite years of behavior that often seemed cold and calculated. That realization didn't change my decision to leave, or my belief that consequences were both necessary and fair, but it added depth to what began as simple justice and evolved into something closer to wisdom. The coastal highway came into view, promising ocean miles and quiet towns where no one knew my past or expected my support. Places where 62 years of experience might be valued instead of drained. I had spent nearly 3 decades enabling someone who wished me gone. Now, I was granting that wish while building the life I should have started long ago. The morning sun reflected off the windshield as I drove toward the unknown, carrying only a suitcase and the knowledge that respect, once lost, is rebuilt through actions, not words. Behind me, Brandon was learning the same lesson from the opposite side. Ahead, the ocean waited with horizons untested and possibilities unexplored. It was time to discover who I was when no one needed anything from me. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.